I'm curious about ghost lights, and do they teach you about ghost lights, or do they talk about ghost lights in theater school?
Uh,
Is this a
yes,
concept that you're familiar with?
I think so. I think so. But if you don't mind, like refreshing my mind, that
Well,
wouldn't
the ghost
hurt.
light is like its function is that you turn it on in a dark theater so that you don't walk off the stage, right? But there's all sorts of folklore that's attached to it now too. But I'm just curious, like is it a thing that because there's a lot of theater students that I've talked to that they have no concept or don't know what a ghost light is.
I think our the resident stage manager at Grenfell did talk about it because there was a conversation around superstitions in theater.
Yeah.
So all of the forbidden words that I'm not going to say right now. And I remember, now that you're talking about it, yes, I remember her talking about it. Her name is Susan Jennings, and she's the best.
Yeah, Susan is the best.
She is the best. Like when I arrived to Newfoundland, and that was 6 years ago almost, which is also mind blowing to me. But when I arrived, I had the purpose of becoming an actor. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to act, and that was the dream. But working with Susan and seeing like the role of the stage manager, I became very curious about that role and how it basically was the glue to the construction paper, the project that we were putting together. Yeah. So I had a second where I was like, I think I want to be a stage manager. And it's because of like how my brain works, that is like, that I considered changing. I went to theater at Grenfell campus. Yeah. So I was on the acting stream, and then for a week, I was like, in my first year, as soon as I arrived, I thought to myself, maybe I should change to the technical theater production side, because I was like, I think that that's what I want. Now, luckily, when I talk myself out of it, because I said, well, Santiago, you're coming all the way from Mexico to pursue acting. Stick to your guns and follow your gut. Do acting, and here we are.
So, like, that's the interesting thing about theater is that through osmosis, sometimes you just sort of learn how to do different things. And you're drawn into different things, and as a theater practitioner who's sort of emerging in your career. Do you find that it's easier or harder to kind of find the time to let those things in, because you're trying to build something? Is it easier to kind of put those new things in, or is it harder to find the time to put those new things in?
Well, obviously, time is always a problem. Yeah. But I think that every single time I step into a room, I'm very open and I'm very aware of my surroundings. So I remember when I was in the room and I was, even as an actor, just like sitting down or sitting out of a scene, that I was just like looking. I would always look at the director, and I would always look at the stage manager. I would look at the actor's work. And really, like, that is something that, sometimes when we're in theater school and you spend like, I don't know, 2 hours out of the 3 sitting down watching others work, might be tedious, but that is pretty helpful. And I find, as I develop my arts practice, developing mentorship opportunities where I try to deconstruct and break down and make it accessible for people to learn from watching. And I feel like that's how I've taught myself into these new roles that I am taking. And Ruth Lawrence, who is an amazing like mentor to me, I have always learned from seeing her. So I believe that, yeah, obviously time is of essence for sure, but when it comes to actually getting yourself into any space, there is always an opportunity for you to learn, right? So
the formation of your company was pretty quick. It came pretty quick on the heels of you leaving theater school. Like, how do you feel that that was just something that was inevitably going to happen for you when you left theater school anyway, or?
Well, I feel like when I was in theater school, especially towards the end of my degree, I realized that the work that I was seeing in theater school, that the work that I was being taught, the playwrights, the plays, the techniques were pretty much white techniques. And some of them didn't speak to me. And at the time, I didn't have the knowledge and the language that I have today. But at the time, I just felt like there was something like very like trying to figure it out. So as an actor, I was given these beautiful texts, these beautiful scenes that I was like, I was trying to make them work for me. And that was a challenge. Like that was a significant challenge in my early career. Well, I guess while I was studying. So when I was like trying to figure this out and to pretend to be someone that I was not, as you know, an actor, I also came to realize that the experiences that I was being taught were completely different to mine, and the perspectives were completely different to mine. And I am not saying that there is something wrong with teaching different perspectives. Quite, I believe that it should be the opposite. The problem was that the perspective that I was being taught was one. Right? So the moment that I started doing my own research, it was actually when I was taking a contemporary dramatic English course at university, where I was introduced to diverse playwrights from Canada. And that to me was very exciting to see that other playwrights who were also fighting against the current were trying to create space and voices for themselves and their communities. And that's what spoke to me. I remember talking, it was actually Artistic Fraud, the producer of Artistic Fraud, Pat Foran, who, when I met him the first time, he said to me, have you ever read Fronteras Americanas by Guillermo Verdecchia? And I said to him, nope. And he was like, okay, I'll get you a copy. And he sent me actually a copy of the script, and when I read it, I was like, this is me.
Right.
And just knowing that this was a Chilean Canadian playwright gave me so much hope. I was like, wow, okay, excellent. That means that there is some space for me in the theater canon. So knowing that, I started making an active decision to create that space for me in the community, but also to seek out for other artists of color across the country and look at their work and what they were doing. And in my research, actually, for that same course with Lois Sherlow at Grenfell campus, she asked us to do a presentation on whatever we wanted to do. And I made a presentation on culturally specific theater companies across the country. So I took on the task of like studying different theater companies across the country that their mandate was about diversity. And you know, I was introduced to the work of beautiful companies. I mean, that work was like a couple of years ago, and I don't remember them all. And I also think I'm going to butcher some of their names, but like the ones that stood out to me were Aluna Theater, Cahoots Theater, both in Toronto. There is Disiri Tunia, I think. I am butchering that name for sure. And then as I was looking at the Canadian canon, I was like, where's Newfoundland?
Right.
Why aren't we doing that work here? Why is nobody doing this? Later on, it was actually when I played Maxim Azumdar in a film produced by the College of the North Atlantic out in Stephenville. That's when I was introduced to this character in the Newfoundland theater history, that I was like, oh, so there was actually someone else trying to do some of that work. But anyway, at my time, between 2015 and 2019, nobody was doing that work. So it was back then when I was in university where I started dreaming about this and be like, well, if there is something that I can contribute to the community, is a theater company that focuses on the work of underrepresented artists. Because also, as a gay man, I understand systems of oppressions in different levels. So, and because of that, I understand representation and what significance it has to people like me to see yourself on stage. And not only on stage, but also as a director, on a title, on a poster, as a writer. So that's what I wanted to do. And then as I became more aware of terms such as equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, I was like, I want to make a space where voices that are not heard loud enough, voices and faces that you usually don't see on stage, can be seen and can be heard. So that's how it all started. It started with an idea, and then it snowballed drastically.
Yeah. Can the work that you do as an actor, that's a lot to heap on. That's a lot to heap on a company, especially a new company. And can all those things move together? You know, you're an actor, you're an artistic director. You're an artistic director that's trying to lay a foothold into a community that, you know, in a lot of ways you're kind of breaking some new ground here. Can all those things move together? Do you feel that you have to kind of, okay, some days I just have to be this, some days I have to be this, some days I have to be this? Can they all move together at once?
I mean, it is fascinating for sure because, yes, I love acting. And acting is, I think it's the place where I feel the most comfortable. However, when I couldn't see myself represented on stage, I decided to write the stories that nobody was writing for me to perform. So I wanted to do my version of Fronteras Americanas and say, you know, here I am and I have something to say. So then that's how I became a playwright. And then after I noticed that people were listening to me and that they were pretty much celebrating my talent as a performer, I was like, well, yeah, the reason is because I usually don't get to play these roles. There's nothing for me so specific. Or the roles that I'm given are always background or stereotypical roles that were not challenging for me to show you what I'm capable of doing. So that's how I decided to become a playwright. So I started like trying to pursue that and pursue that and pursue that. So with the theater company, what I'm trying to do is to create spaces not only for my voice, because yes, I appreciate and I celebrate and I'm very grateful that the community is celebrating my presence and my voice. However, I am aware that there is way more people around me that have something to say. So that's how I started with my writing mentorship with Robert Chafe back in 2019. Well, we actually did it last year in 2020. Because I said, well, the reason why we don't see diversity on stage is because we don't have diverse writers. Right. So in the same way that I understood how my writing had an impact, I decided to do exactly the same with other diverse, sorry, myself, and I'm just gonna mute that. So I just wanted to do the same for other diverse emerging voices in the community. So my work obviously intersects in very different ways because I began writing because I wanted to act, right? Yep. So because of that, I was able to promote playwriting for other writers. And through that work with Todos, now I am able to expand a little on my craft as an actor, as a director, as a writer, right? So the way that I am guiding the company is in such a way that I can create spaces for other members in the community, but obviously some places where I can also gain artistic experience. So for instance, with Todos, we have this new project, Newfoundlanded, which is very exciting, and in that component, I am trying to lift up the voices of other immigrants and refugees that might have not even been to the theater before. And in that project, I'm also trying to raise my voice as a playwright. With Todos, we're presenting one of my plays, Earn, which is a two-hander about the exploration of home from the perspective of two immigrants that have lived in St. John's for a long period of time. So in that play, I am acting, I wrote the play, but at the same time, I'm giving opportunities to other members of the community, other artists, to also take a stab on roles that they have never done professionally. And that is something that I have learned. I have been given opportunities where I have failed professionally. And because of those failures, I can tell you that I'm learning about them and I'm becoming a better theater maker.
Do you feel that you are a writer now that is in and of this place as well? Do you feel grounded as a Newfoundland and Labradorian artist, or?
Yes,
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. I think, and sometimes I question about that right now. Like, who am I as a playwright? and right now, I can tell you that I am a Newfoundland playwright.
Yeah.
And I say that with pride, but I obviously don't disregard my Mexican heritage. Quite the opposite. If you look at my work right now, the voice that I am trying to raise is the immigrant voice, the culturally specific, culturally diverse voice in Newfoundland and Labrador. Because again, I think that my work as a playwright also focuses on questioning what does Newfoundland and Labrador theater looks like. Because again, my voice is a Newfoundland and Labrador voice, as it is yours.
Yep. Do you feel that that drive has always been with you? Like when you were growing up in Mexico City, and you were, probably finding your first, forays into the arts and into performing arts, has this type of drive to have a bigger sense of theater, has that always been with you?
No.
No.
No. Actually, when I was in Mexico, again, like my dream was to be an actor.
Right.
That was the thing. And the reason why I have so much appreciation for Newfoundland and Labrador is because this is where I found myself as a human being, as an artist. This is the place where I actually got to understand who was Santiago and what he wanted. And I have to say, Newfoundland and Labrador also opened to me the perspective of becoming more than a performer, right? I wouldn't have ever imagined that I would be writing. That was something that I was not interested. But then when I started doing it, I was like, oh, okay. And then also being here has made me think a lot about my culture and where do I come from and what is it that I'm giving back to my community in Mexico, my family, but at the same time to the community here in Newfoundland that has supported me and welcomed me since day one.
When you get, so now you're going to go into this project Newfoundlanded, and you're going to, the front part of the work obviously is research, interviewing. You're going to have to talk to a lot of people. What is it that you've structured for yourself in terms of how those interviews are going to play out, and what are you hoping to hear from your subject matter?
Yeah, well, I am so excited and obviously so grateful for everyone that has put in some support throughout the development of this project. Obviously, the Arts and Culture Center and the Arts Connectors Program, but the Canada Council for the Arts, White Rooster Theatre, and Playwrights Atlantic Resource Center, because there is something so special about this project where we are able to celebrate just one small aspect of how our province is quite colorful and diverse. So what I'm trying to get from this experience is the opportunity to engage people that I might not be familiar with. Also let them know that, that they will be seen and they will be heard. And what I'm interested in capturing in the play is, or in this process of connecting with immigrants and refugees, is to hear about their experiences. Because as I've discovered for myself as a playwright, I have a story to tell, but there are so many other people out there that their experiences have been completely different. And so far, since the announcement of the project and asking for people to sign up to these interviews, I have seen already a very contrasting response from the participants saying like, oh, I've had a great experience. This is the place that I should have always been. But I have also read a couple of comments where people are like, yeah, it's beautiful, but, right? And I think that diversity within experiences is the interesting, the thing that interests me the most as a theater maker to bring that to the stage, but also to local audiences to see, well, we are here and we have something to say, and it has not always been perfect, and it has always not being really bad either, right? So it's to start a conversation about what it looks like, what it feels like for people like me to be in a place where you're far, far away from home, if you may.
Do you think that that's part of the drive too? Like, is that the questioning? Is the concept of home? Is that something that you're trying to drive home at, or
well,
drive home at?
I guess so. I think that in terms of my experience and the work that I am, again, I think that in my playwriting, I am trying to define myself as a human being, as an artist. So big questions about belonging and home and relationships, like how does that play on me and my culture and my identity? So obviously, yes, that is something that I am very interested in. I think that people, and I have had this conversation with other immigrants where I say, and this is, I guess, like there is a little bit of controversy within myself about when people ask me, where am I from?
Yeah.
Because the question, where are you from? It makes me feel like I don't belong.
Right.
And I'm like, well, yeah, I know that I was not born here, but I live downtown St. John's, Newfoundland, Labrador.
Right.
That's where home is right now. So when people ask me, where are you from? I'm always like, however, I understand that that experience is just my experience, and that there are so many other people out there that they say, oh, home is in my home country, right?
Yep.
And that they have this sense of belonging to their roots, right? And I'm not saying, again, just because I say, oh, home is Newfoundland and Labrador, that doesn't mean that I forget about Mexico. Like, that's not it. So I think that obviously that conversation and the differences between the appreciation of, or the understanding of belonging is something that I'm fascinated about.
Right. And your work now is splintered off, not just, in theater. Now you work in film, you write for film. Now you're working for a dance company. What are all those things bringing into your experience as an artist and a creator and a maker?
Oh, well, you know what? Yeah, it's, sometimes I'm like, why can I just want to act. What am I doing? But at the same time, I feel like everything is so informative. Like one thing comes with each other. Like when I became a playwright, I became a better actor. When I became a director, I became a better playwright and actor, right? So it all has like a ripple effect that I find so gratifying because I'm understanding my craft a little bit more. So, and I have seen that in my own work now that I'm working for Playwrights Atlantic Resource Center, because I also do that. I am the artistic associate out there. I get to understand dramaturgy in an aspect that helps me understand my playwriting way better, right? So when I write now, I approach my writing from that lens, and I'm like, okay. So it's interesting, and now that I am the general manager at Neighborhood Dance Works, like that position also helps me understand, like, okay, how can I drive my own theater company? It helps me understand budgets way better. It helps me understand scheduling. But also the interesting about that specific role is getting my feet wet in another media, right? Where I'm like, okay, so we're talking about people on stage, but what we do is different. I think it all is, to a certain extent, rooted in storytelling. So that is very inspiring for me, even as an actor, to think about my body, right? So I think that everything goes with each other.
Yeah. I'm curious too, Santiago, because I mean, your career has really started to move, and how has 2020 and pandemic and COVID, like where everything has kind of been halted, like for someone who was really just starting to rise, like in terms of the work and the success. What do you think what's gonna look like on the other end? If there is some sort of other end to this,
Oof, I don't know. I mean, and you say that as we are 6 feet each other,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. And we did the masks and we screened and
We did all of that.
So, yeah.
We did all of that. I put some hand sanitizer in my hands. Yeah. Well, 2020 was an amazing year for me, I have to say. And I recognize that privilege. I recognize that I had a very beautiful year. Yes, of course. In 2020, I got the opportunity to teach at George Brown Theater School. Like, come on. That's fucking
huge.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Then I got to go to Mexico. I had, and this is, another thing about me, was that I devoted myself so much to my work that I actually stopped visiting Mexico. And it took me 3 years to go back to see my mom. It took me 3 years to see my mom. And it was because, again, luckily I was pretty proactive and I was working every summer at Rising Tide Theater. Or here when I moved to St. John's, like I was busy. So I couldn't make time to go to Mexico. So in 2020, I went to Mexico. And when I was in Mexico, the pandemic hit, right? So that was a very challenging moment for me because I had to, even though I was with my family, I was eating my favorite food in the world and I was speaking Spanish 24/7, I felt like I didn't belong because my life was here. My projects were here. At the time, I was doing a playwrights unit at Eastern Front Theater in Halifax. I was also part of the Paprika Festival in Toronto. And so I had a lot of projects on the go. And I had like a couple of other projects slated for that year. And then I was like, but I'm in Mexico. What am I gonna do? Anyway, the point being is that I felt that that was a difficult thing for me to navigate because I was with my family, my loved ones. But at the same time, I felt like that was not the place for me to be. And I think that my parents, and that's why I am where I am, because my parents have always supported me. They have always been behind me. And, you know, sometimes they're like, are you sure? And I'm always, yeah, I am. And they can see that. So because of that, because of their support, I was able to come back. I mean, there were other things that pushed me to come back, that one being my immigration status in the country.
Right.
I had to come back. Anyway, long story short is that for 2020, because in that year I was doing a lot of writing work, right? I did my playwrights residency with Park.
Yeah.
So I had something to look forward to. I was working on these 2 plays for those playwrights unit. So I had a lot on the go. But then there were two things happened in 2020. And in my place, I feel like in my relationship to the space and the place that I was in, Black Lives Matter happened in 2020. And that was a very difficult conversation because I don't have a Black experience. I do not. I am not an indigenous person from this land. I do not understand what that level of oppression is for both sides. However, as a person of color myself, I do understand that. I can understand at a different level what that looks like, what racism looks like, what discrimination looks like. So being here and having all of these conversations about that and how that, like for instance, you can see that reflected on our sector, specifically in the arts, I found so overwhelming and so frustrating that people around me were finally waking up. I was so happy that people were actually recognizing that there was so much work to be done. However, I was really sad because those conversations I was having back in 2015.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting is that we've spoken about this before too, and a lot of what we had talked about too is that you were recognizing the functional problems of the system.
Yeah.
You know, 3 or 4 years ago, and we were trying to have conversations about that, like, you know, recognizing that there's certainly large things that weigh heavy on the psyche and emotionally, but there are actually, there are like functional problems with navigating and moving through the system. If you're, if you're an immigrant, landed immigrant, if you're indigenous, there's challenges mechanically, inside the system.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And I think that was like the difficult part because, again, like, and I'm so glad that you bring that up because we have been having, like, you and I have had those chats before. And the reason why I started Todos Productions was partly because of that.
Yeah.
Because of that racism and that discrimination that I experienced. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to create my safe space. And I'm going to give that opportunity for fellow artists like me to feel safe in a space. So to me, like, just looking around and all of these organizations saying, like, we should be doing better. And I was like, well, yeah, you you should have been. And I remember telling you about it. So it was very frustrating and very heartbreaking for me. So with that, and again, great things came out of that conversation. And I'm really happy to see that BIPOC voices have been lifted up in a significant way. However, the thing that I find really frustrating is when it becomes performative. When it's like, oh, 2020 is a year of Black Lives Matter. Like, Black Lives Matter has been running for years. Like, this is not a new movement. So creating opportunities and specifically talking about artistic opportunities that are one-time thing offers, I call that performative allyship. So when people reach out to me to partake, I'll be like, no, because you don't care about the systemic problem.
Right.
You're just trying to put a Band-Aid on the problem, and that's not right.
Are you worried that that the conversation is going to change, and if we get into new normal, how new is the normal going to be? I guess is the question, right?
Well, and that is the thing about like Black Lives Matter and COVID. Both of them happened at the same time,
Yeah.
right? And I believe, and this is just me, that we were more tuned into the Black Lives Matter movement because we were at home. We were literally in our houses where we couldn't do anything but pay attention to actually like look at the problem. So because of that, we started amazing conversations. And again, I have been part of beautiful conversations, frustrating some of them too, but beautiful conversations with arts organizations, art leaders, where we're talking about the problem. And I'm saying, this is just my point of view. I'm not saying that this is it, but these are my 2 cents. So you should also make some consultation with other artists. But those conversations have been happening. So what my hope is that when we get out of this, when we are on the other side, we can look at our arts practice in a place where we are challenging oppression, challenging harm, rethinking ways to take care of one another. I think that, and I can see it. I can see people talking more about it, like trying to make an effort to rethink outreach. Because again, like I have had so many conversations about people trying to say like, oh, like we're not diverse because people don't come to us. Well, that is problem number 1, because you cannot make people come to you all the time. I have done that work because, I had to do it. I had to be, like that was my way for me to be seen and to be heard. However, I understand that not all people are interested in doing that, right? So anyway, my hope is that coming out of this and just like this was an opportunity for all of us to rethink how do we create art, and how can we take how can we take care of each other, and how can we hold accountable each other to do better? Because I think we can all do better.
So as we come now to the end of our conversation, we're talking about starting points. What do you think a starting point is going to look like now for you as a playwright? If the structure has to change, and it does change, what do you think the starting point, the point of entry into an idea or a concept is going to look like going forward?
That is very interesting, Aiden, because I felt like I have always approached my playwriting first from a very personal level. Like my first play, Altar, was about a breakup. And it was because I was just going through a breakup. So pretty personal. However, obviously in the writing, you just like swift away gently from the true story. But I always start from a very personal point of view. And I always keep in mind who is watching. Especially for a community like Newfoundland and Labrador, I always think, who is watching? And what can I teach my audience with this? How can I introduce a new concept? How can I introduce a new question? So I think that, I'm not saying that my playwriting skills haven't developed through this time, but I think that it remains consistent because that was the work that I was already doing. Right. However, obviously now that I have a way more understanding of the craft of playwriting, because I didn't go to school to become a playwright. I was just like, word, and, blackout. Now I have a better idea on how to make people get into it and you know, really pose a question for audiences to leave the theater and have a conversation about it when they get home. Because I don't want people to just come see my show and be like, that was great. And that's it. Like, I want people to talk about it and think about it afterwards and say, okay, how can I do better? What am I doing now? Or, and not necessarily about racial aspects, but just look around ourselves and acknowledge that we're all different and that we all have different perspectives. So let's have that conversation.
So you're going to start have you started the process now for the interviews for Newfoundlanded, or?
Yeah, well, the call came out just on Tuesday morning.
Yeah, right.
And so far we've had a great response from immigrants and refugees across the province, which has been really great. So right now we are moving on in the next couple of weeks into the interviewing process. Mm-hmm. So what that's going to look like is that Vanessa Cardoso, who's also an amazing multidisciplinary artist from Brazil here in St. John's, is going to join me to interview these folks and ask about their experiences in Newfoundland and Labrador. And then our plan is to capture, and we plan on recording all of these interviews, just obviously because of COVID. We are going to host these interviews online. So we will have these conversations with people, and then we want to transcribe the conversations into text. So later on, so that is like the second phase of the project. And then later on, and that will be more so towards the end of the summer, maybe, it depends on how fast we move with the interviews and the transcription process. But later on, I want to get together with a group of local immigrant writers to craft a play based on those interviews. And that is a way for me to honor these people's words, these people's stories, these people's voices. I think that it would be an interesting way to sew them all together. Mm-hmm. And that is the thing that excites me. I feel like as a theater maker, as a theater maker, I'm always curious. I'm always like trying to look at new ways to create a project. Sometimes when I see something that I'm like, oh my God, that feels or that sounds so difficult, I'm into it. Right. Yeah. So I think that this project is kind of like that. I feel like I am very interested in seeing how do we put these opposing experiences or similar experiences into a narrative, and how can we tell this story. So yeah, that's basically the process. I do want to say that because one of the main things that I wanted to do with this project was also to connect one-on-one with people, which obviously because of COVID, it's so difficult, like for us to, you know, say hello to each other and give hugs, like that is so difficult now. But when it comes to this project, I'm aware that not everyone has access to a stable Wi-Fi connection. Yeah. So I am also very interested in finding people and folks out there that are interested in finding new ways to communicate. So say if they want to write it down, cool, let's write it down. If you want to, and that's the other thing that I have also asked in my form, what can I do to make you feel comfortable in the interview? Like the interview, and I gave that heads up. I am an ESL person, and my English is my second language. So just like, don't worry. Like, English will be a challenge for both of us, if your mother tongue is not English. But I also said, like if you want to express yourself in your mother tongue, go for it. And I will figure it out. Like I will reach out to other people and say, hey, can you help me translate this? And I feel like I want to make this accessible and a joyous experience for people to also partake. Now, right now, we are counting only on 40 people just because, we have limited time and limited resources. However, I really want to look at all of these voices and create a picture that is like the most representative of what is it to be an immigrant and a refugee in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Well, we're going to be really interested in seeing what the final product is going to be, but if you feel that there's interesting things that happen along the way, send us stories, information, postings, anything like that, and we'll make sure that we get those out in the world too.
Absolutely. I think that that would be really cool, actually. I am working with a designer to create some sort of like a visual campaign. So I think that that would be great to find ways in which we can keep the conversation going. Because again, I don't want this to be like, oh, we did a play.
Yep.
That's it. Like, how can we keep the conversation going? How can we share resources? How can we, I don't know, like, get people interested in theater making? That people that might have never thought of theater as a venue to express yourself.
It's a big thing.
It is a big
But
undertaking.
you seem like a person who's going to be okay with big things as you go through your career, so I think it's in good hands.
I appreciate that.
Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
We good?
See, I told you.
Good chat, man. Good stuff.